Maiduguri IDP camp.
On Good Morning Nigeria today, we are discussing corruption and you.
Rhoda, when you're talking about corruption and you,
And
I don't know. And you too.
Okay.
Well, you know that. Imagine we set up a debate between Nigerian leaders on one side and citizens on the other side. And we give them a debate topic, corruption in Nigeria. Who is to blame? The leaders or the citizens? We had this banter before coming to this place and it was quite exciting. So Rhoda, how do you think such a debate will go?
Of course, Cliff, you should know first of all that I would not sit in that kind of a hall for such a debate. I tell you, it would be a very, very hot one. I imagine that neither sides would admit or want to admit that they're the guilty party. In fact, each side would vehemently and angrily blame the other for the act of corruption in the land. But really, Cliff, I think that where the seriousness of the matter lies most is everyone pointing a finger to everyone else. And I think that has been the issue we've been battling with so far.
Rhoda, you cannot be more correct. And of course, we do not mean to trivialize a serious matter. We're just trying to paint the picture of what looks like a vicious circle. The issue of corruption seems to be up for discussion all the time. And almost all the time, the image in the minds of people is that of atrocities committed by highly placed persons. You know, financial corruption by political office holders, whether elected or otherwise. Rhoda, don't you think so?
Yes, of course, Cliff, you're absolutely right. It comes more naturally to us to blame people in position of authority for the corruption in the land. And others look like saints who have never done anything wrong. And Cliff, I'd like to observe quickly that, seriously, the corruption scenario appears to be the same in countries considered to be advanced. In the West, there have been serious cases of corruption, some of them actually really involving multinationals. Take, for example, the Halliburton issue. That's an issue that is still alive today. It was also an eye-opener when looted funds in Nigeria were traced to major banking institutions in other countries. And we've had to begin to request for them to be sent back. Well, that's by the way. Back here, we still look inwards to address our highly publicized corruption issues.
Well, yes, in Nigeria, there is no argument all about the resultant damaging effect of corrupt practices on governance, national economy, and the social life of the citizenry. Well, some even say the political structure is to be blamed for corruption among the leaders and the led. And that takes us back to the notion about corruption being the handiwork of the elite alone. Now, Rhoda, what I wonder is this: if it's only the leaders that do evil, are they not part of the society? Are their actions and inactions not a reflection of the larger society?
Well, you're taking us there already, Cliff, and that's, of course, the poor and the rich. They are members of the society equally vulnerable to corruption. But for different reasons, that is why we're expanding the horizon of this discussion from the regular perspective of corruption in high places to the people angle today. We have a chance to tackle the matter. Who takes the greater blame for corruption in the land? The people or their leaders?
Or maybe you. Or
you.
That's right, Rhoda. We'll make the topic simple, straight, unambiguous, but very probing. The topic of discussion on Good Morning Nigeria today is corruption and you. Welcome to the program. My name is Cliff Ayoze. Rhoda?
Of course, I'm Rhoda Albo. It's a pleasure to welcome you to this edition of the program Good Morning Nigeria, coming to you live on Africa's largest television network, the NTA. Well, Cliff, of course, you know this is an issue that, of course, we've seen previous administrations, you know, try to tackle the issue of corruption before now. But this administration has made it an issue that has become, it's a front burner right now. And of course, with the funds we see being recovered, you know, it's obvious that it's something that is deep-rooted than we actually thought it was.
Rhoda, I can bet you that this debate is already going on, you know, among our viewing public right now as we speak, even before we open up the space for that interaction. And don't forget that you will also be part of of this very interaction
Yes.
through our Twitter handle, NTA GMN. But we continue from somewhere.
Of course, as usual, we'll have our companion segments, which is our newspaper review. We've got business, we've got sports, arts, and entertainment. And not forgetting our foreign news. But right now, we'll bring in the news early, and we have Lydia Bassi. Lydia Bassi, looking radiant this morning. Of course, nice compliment there coming from Cliff. Good morning.
I wonder what about corruption.
Of course, we must fight corruption and at least avoid doing anything that's wrong in the society. Good morning, Rhoda and Cliff, and good morning, Nigerians. Welcome to the news. President Buhari condemns missile attack on Makkah, and he has condemned the ballistic missile launched by Houthi militia targeting the holy city of Makkah. This was during a telephone call to King Salman bin Abdulaziz Al Saud of Saudi Arabia. A statement by the special advisor to the president on media and publicity, Femi Adesina, states that President Buhari said it is reprehensible and ignoble for terrorists to target a holy land where millions of Muslims gather for pilgrimage. President Buhari reiterated the need to strengthen international support and coalition in the fight against terrorism and violent extremism, noting that when the world stands together, there is no way good will not prevail over evil. Vice President Yemi Osinbajo has reiterated his call on Nigerian elite to come together based on a common consensus to build the nation. Speaking at the dinner event organized by the Christian Association of Nigerian Americans in Houston, USA, the Vice President noted that there is a growing consensus by all and sundry on the need for good governance. Explaining the need for a group of Nigerians who are committed to lifting the nation to rise up, Vice President Osinbajo noted that this was important to counter and stop those who are working to plunder the resources of the country. He said the Buhari administration takes diaspora issues very seriously and commended members of the association for their demonstration of patriotism even while outside the shores of the country.
I believe that it's time for those who are determined to do right and who are determined to work for the greatness of our country to come together from wherever they may be from and whatever religion they may belong to. That is the quality of the new tribe that our nation deserves. And I very strongly believe that here in this room are men and women who will be members of that new tribe, who will contribute to the greatness of our country.
The presidency has advised journalists and other Nigerians to stop linking President Muhammadu Buhari to the legal travails of some recently arrested judges in the country. The senior special assistant to the president on media and publicity, Malam Garba Shehu, said President Muhammadu Buhari will be the last person to authorize anybody to induce a judge to pervert the course of justice. Malam Shehu recalled that despite his personal familiarity with some court judges, the president had never used that familiarity to seek favors from them from 2003, 2007, and 2011 when he was challenging the fairness of the presidential election results from the lowest to the highest courts in the land during the periods in question. The senior special assistant also explained that as a politician, Buhari had never suggested to his lawyers to approach any judge for assistance to win his cases. He said the president lives by this principle and has never deviated from it. On the fate of the judicial officers facing corruption allegations, the presidential media aide said the president does not tell courts how to do their jobs and that anybody accused of corruption is protected by law to defend their innocence. He explained that the purpose of the law is to punish the guilty and acquit the innocent, noting that the law protects the rights of everyone. Malam Garba Shehu said the president does not have any powers to force any court to convict anybody who is innocent, arguing that in a democratic society that cannot happen without resistance by the people. And now to security matters. Troops of Operation Lafia Adole deployed behind Bakassi internally displaced persons IDP camp on Damboa Road in Maiduguri on Sunday intercepted and killed a male suicide bomber who attempted to sneak into the IDP camp. According to the Acting Director, Army Public Relations Colonel Sani Kukasheka Usman, a vigilante sentry cited the suicide bomber and laid in wait until he came close when he shot and killed the terrorist as he tried to force his way to the IDP camp fence. The improvised explosive device IED vest trapped on the bomber failed to detonate, so a combined team of military and police explosive ordnance device experts were called in to safely detonate it. Boko Haram terrorists ambush troops in another development. Federal and state ministries of information and culture are to mount aggressive campaigns aimed at making people, especially the youths, embrace the acquisition of skills as a means to earn a living. This is contained in a 21-point communique issued at the end of the 46th meeting of the National Council on Information in Asaba, Delta State. The communique calls on states to activate all media platforms to promote government policies and programs, as well as key into the Change Begins With Me campaign. The communique harps on the need to fast-track action on rural internet connectivity and organized training in all the 774 local government areas on the use of e-media to facilitate rural and urban connectivity. The federal government says it will continue to provide an enabling environment for reforestation and sustainable forest management. Minister of Environment Amina Mohammed stated this at the flag-off of a forestation project in Ekiti State.
Tree planting for the survival of our nation.
We observe nobody is interested of doing an afforestation anymore.
The staff of office has been presented to the new Emir of Borgu Kingdom in Niger State with emphasis on the need for peace, unity, and progress of the country. Eminent personalities, including federal government delegation led by the FCT Minister Mohamed Musa Bellos, state governors, and traditional rulers, graced the historic event held in Busa.
I've been contributing one quarter to the peace and development and progress of our communities, the state and the Nigeria in general.
Embrace education, follow your king, and respect the authority of the day.
Public relations practitioners in the country have been challenged to initiate and promote ideas that will foster unity for the attainment and sustainability of the country. This was the submission of speakers at the Dinner and Awards Night to honor distinguished Nigerians. The event was organized by the Nigerian Institute of Public Relations in Lagos. And that's the news for now. We'll take a break and then Good Morning Nigeria will continue with Cliff and Rhoda. Good morning.
If you hear a bomb explosion or gunshots of an active shooter, that might be a terror attack. At such times, always remember 3 action words: run, hide, report. Don't try to run towards the terror scene to save the situation, because there might be a second bomb blast or another attack. Run far away and take cover. Make sure you are safe first. Yes, it is in our nature to sympathize over the hurt, but remember, only trained personnel can help in such situations. When in a secured environment, promptly call relevant authorities and help will come. For anonymous reporting, call 09630-3250-5 or 0813-2222-106. If you see something, say something. Nigeria unite against terrorism. This message is brought to you by the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
Twinkle, twinkle, little star. Hi guys, look how my baby Jamil has grown. Time flies and I'm sure it's the same for all you moms out there. And as they grow, there's a worry we all share: skin rash. Some use lotions or petroleum jelly, but I found what works for Jamil is Nigerian Pampers. It has built-in lotion to help protect his delicate skin and keep him dry. See you in the morning, Jam Jam. Good morning, happy Jam Jam. Good morning. Dry and soft and no sign of a rash. But don't take my word for it. Join many other moms and try Nigerian Pampers with lotion. Let's beat the rash. We moms know best.
Yes, hello, good morning, Nigeria, where we shall be focusing on corruption and you. But first, we'll talk business. Minister of Finance, Kemi Adeosun, says 30% of Nigeria's foreign exchange is consumed in fuel importation, and Nigerian investors call for enabling environment to boost local content development. Details on business news with Joy Ozo.
Minister of Finance Kemi Adeosun has said that 30% of the country's demand for foreign exchange was for fuel importation. Mrs. Adeosun stated this in Lagos at the launch of First Game, a product of First Bank of Nigeria Limited, aimed at empowering women through wealth creation. She said her government was working very hard to transform the country from consumption-driven to investment-driven nation. Mr. Adeosun said that it was disheartening that Nigeria exports crude oil and imports petroleum, adding that the nation loses a lot of money exporting unprocessed raw materials due to inability to process them, hence the need to build infrastructure to export processed products in order to earn more foreign exchange. To achieve desired results, she says the key focus of the agenda is investment in infrastructure. Investors in the country have reiterated the need for Nigerians to strengthen local content development through patriotic patronage of locally made goods as potent force to revive the nation's economy. Tourism and hospitality development expert Mr. Kende Olaosibikan, who acts on local content development, lamented to NTA News in an interview in Abuja that many top Nigerian businessmen would encourage captive flight by partnering foreigners to import goods that can even be easily manufactured in Nigeria. He reckoned that this category of persons should rather woo their investment partners abroad to set home structures to manufacture the imported trade items locally, with the multiplier impact of creating jobs and increasing local technology.
We have the wherewithal to attract investors there. So on our own, we should be more committed to it. We should be more serious about it. It's not just going abroad, going to vacation and just telling people, the same people that you are bringing investors, go there, bring them to Nigeria. We are going to gain a lot. And talking about recession is going down already. We are going to overcome it earlier than expected.
Also speaking, an indigenous businessman, Mr. Pato Rama, who succeeded in pulling some investors from Egypt to invest in Nigeria's sports and pharmaceuticals, noted that the input of these investors will contribute to strengthening the nation's economy. However, he says there must be deliberate attempt to create an enabling environment for such businesses to thrive.
So we need to be more liberal at the federal government level, at the state government level, to provide the enabling environment for investors, especially at this time. State government should be liberal with land. It should be liberal, make it seamless for people to come to Nigeria to invest.
Next is a graphic summary of trading figures on the floor of the Nigerian Stock Exchange for Friday, October 28. With business news, I am Joy Uzo.
Thank you very much, Joy Uzo. It's time now for us to take a look at what stories made the front pages of some Nigerian dailies this morning.
What are the newspapers talking about this morning? We have our newspaper reviewer, Bayo. It's our pleasure to have you again.
Thank you. Good morning. Good morning, Ruda, and good morning, Nigeria.
And dominantly on the papers today, we have economic reports and health. And what have you? I don't know. Rhoda, what do you have
some
there?
Political stories
some political stories
on the front pages of today's dailies. But then I'd like us to begin with the Punch. On the Punch, it says just, it's not the lead story is quite different, but then if we have to look at the economy, definitely just beside, okay, Just beside it, I think the Punch is not really having a lot of economic stories, but then let's begin with the lead story. The Punch leads this way: Boko Haram recruiting youths to supply fuel in Borno, NSCDC. That story is on page 12, with a rider suicide bomber targeting Borno IDP camp shot dead. That's the lead story on the Punch. And let's move quickly to The Nation. The Nation, just above the masthead, it says, Central Bank of Nigeria to blacklist fraudulent bank customers. More knocks for senators, reps over CCB, CCT Act. And also we have pharmacists cancer seal 373 drugstores in Kaduna. The lead story, just before we go to the lead story on the Punch, just below the masthead, it says Nigeria lost 2.1 trillion naira to militancy, says NNPC boss. And the lead story on The Nation, $2.2 billion arms deal, Dasuki to call Jonathan as witness. $2.2 billion arms deal, Dasuki to call Jonathan as witness. And let's quickly move now over to the Vanguard. The Vanguard, just above the masthead, it says World Bank, IMF mount pressure on federal government to come up with economic blueprint. World Bank, IMF mounts pressure on federal government to come up with economic blueprint. And the lead story on the Vanguard, Niger Delta leaders reject federal government $10 billion development package. Niger Delta leaders reject federal government's $10 billion development package. As with riders, as clerk, 13 monarchs, 32 others meet Buhari tomorrow. Sikh Marshal plan for, of course, the Niger Delta. Fresh tension in region over maritime university status not affected. Kachuku and militants continue bombing despite Buhari's meeting with Niger Delta leaders. All right, Cliff.
All right, we're moving on now. We go to The Guardian. And under the masthead of Guardian, we have a Greek. Others suffer setback as lending raise favor governments. Forex crisis, recession hike raise for traders, manufacturers. We still fund real estate, says lenders. And other stories, we have Nigerians in the diaspora remit 23.5 trillion naira to economy in 5 years. And FG laws, Swiss government support for migration dialogue. And on the right part of the Guardian front page, we have absence of Auditor General may stall government's bid to borrow $29.96 billion. That's the leading economy reports on the Guardian this morning. Moving on to the leadership. Leadership has under the masthead, federal government targets 10 billion cubic feet daily gas production in 3 years. And of course, the dominating topic there is banks sabotage CBN's 800 billion naira intervention funds, agriculture, power, aviation, micro, small and medium enterprises, related sectors affected. And banks have preference for high interest loans. And of course, these are some of the top economy reports. Bayo.
Yes, I said that, Cliff, talking about the economy, the central bank has actually come out to say that it's going to sanction banks that do not follow its guidelines. However, let's go to the story that was read by Rhoda earlier on, that Boko Haram, that NSDC in Maiduguri has raised alarm that youths are conveying fuel from Maiduguri to Gaborone-Gara. Gaborone-Gara is a border town between Nigeria and Niger. And because they are paid about 15,000 for every 5 liters of petrol, these youths have made that their current business. Luckily for us, the NSDC were able to intercept them. They also convey foodstuffs and sell them. That apparently is because the military and all the Operation Lafia Dole has succeeded in cutting off all the supplies to the insurgents. Meanwhile, yesterday, a male suicide bomber was trying to scale the fence of Bakassi IDP camp. Luckily, he was spotted, and the soldier shot him, and he was killed. Luckily, too, his suicide bomb did not detonate. It was the bomb experts who, unfortunately, however, on Friday, 2 female suicide bombers succeeded in infiltrating the camp and caused havoc. There were several deaths and several of IDPs who were injured. Talking about the diaspora, as much as $23.5 million has been sent home by Nigerians abroad in the period of 5 years. Talking abroad too, Vice President Professor Yemi Osinbajo says over 800 suspected herdsmen have been arrested by security agencies. He made a disclosure on Friday at a town hall meeting in Houston, Texas. He clarified that the President has given firm instructions to security agencies, first, to arrest herdsmen attacking communities anywhere in the country. Secondly, or also anyone who is found in possession of arms, firearms, should be also arrested. He declared that the slow pace of criminal justice system is what is responsible for these people being brought to justice. He clarified that the herdsmen issue and grazmen have been mispresented to the public as if it is a religious issue. He says it is not. And also the fact that it has started even before the advent of President Muhammadu Buhari in office. He said the notion that the herdsmen, farmers clashes were going on because President Muhammadu Buhari is a Fulani is a fallacy.
Well, one other story on leadership is talking about Nigeria. Nigeria moves from 107 to 96 on global rule of law rating. You have details of that report on the leadership, page 5 of that report there. And other political stories on the leadership, we have Ondo Goba, mass defection looms in PDP, Mimico, APC, Chieftains Mall Alliance. And we also have on Daily Trust, say, can Buhari out of judges' inducement, presidency? And of course, we have malaria ravages stays. That's on the front page of Daily Trust this morning. And at the bottom, we have reps, Salmon Customs CJ, over 250 million naira insurance cover. And also we have many feared killed in troops insurgents clash. And Dangote canvasses tax holidays from government. We have other political stories, but I think we make do with that. Again, sniper takes out suicide bomber near IDP camp in Maiduguri on The Guardian. Do you have something there?
All right. On The Nation, just below the masthead, it says Ondo 2016. INEC right on PDP candidate. INEC right on PDP candidate, says Falana and Kiamu. OK promises industrial rebirths, and Buhari Osinbajo Yegun for Akeredolu's campaign. That story you can get on page 37 of The Nation. And just on the foot of the paper, it says why federal government's $29 billion loan may delay. Why federal government's $29 billion loan bid may delay. Badaru cuts government house allowance. That's on page 42 of The Nation. Now, let's quickly move over to the Vanguard. And on Vanguard, just on the right-hand corner, you see 11 insurance firms underwrite NNPC's Group Life for 2.4 billion naira. That's on page 8 of the Vanguard. And below that, Jonathan tasks politicians on unity and harmony. Jonathan tasked politicians on unity and harmony. And I'd like to move very, very quickly to the Punch. On the Punch, just above the masthead, it says, Niger police kills 2 suspected illegal miners. That's on page 12. And no nepotism, detention or critics under my government, says Jonathan. That's on page 9. We're on trial of Mieti leaders killers, says Bello. That's on page 12 of the Punch. And let's go quickly on to the foot of the paper. You'd see there Supreme Court justices under probe, withdrawal from sittings. Supreme Court justices under probe withdraws from sitting. That's on page 10. And you see Buhari behind Jimoh Ibrahim's emergence as Baba Tokbe. That's on page 9 of the Punch. All right, I'll read something to you much later on the Punch.
Let's get your view on that.
Ondo State is becoming the talking point now.
Yeah,
sadly, too, there have been demonstrations and there's been one fatality already. And I think the security agencies and the politicians must get their acts together. You recall also that Rhoda read that some lawyers have come to stand behind INEC for its decision to recognize Jimoh Ibrahim as the PDP candidate. Recall that INEC clarified that it acted based on a court ruling, and it also added a caveat that subject to the superior ruling of a higher court, that decision will be revisited. So I think what we need to do is that Ondo State can be very volatile when it comes to politics, and so all the leaders there, all political parties, need to be circumspect so as not to cause confusion. No political office is worth anybody's human life. Talking about former presidents and the presidential spokesman Garba Shehu has said that President Muhammadu Buhari should be left out of the debacle or the crisis that the judges have found themselves in. He stated categorically that though President Muhammadu Buhari had familiarity with some judges, he never sought favors in 2003, 2007, and 2011 elections when he challenged the fairness of the elections from the lowest to the highest court. He said that he never suggested to his lawyers to approach any judge for any favor. Neither does he tell courts how to do their job. Anyone accused of corruption is protected by law to defend his innocence. Other speaking former presidents include President Obasanjo, who spoke at the Tony Elumelu Foundation over Entrepreneurship Forum. Mrs. Folorunsho Alakija had recorded her frustration, particularly when she was trying to operate her oil business. However, President Olusegun Obasanjo retorted that he set out to create 50 Nigerians as billionaires. He regretted that he failed. However, he succeeded in making 25, and one of them, one of them was
something of interest. By looking at the front page of the Guardian today, we're talking about repositioning our economy. But when we look at the lending rates as published by the Guardian on the front page, we have agriculture sector with 21 banks lending at 26%, mining and quarrying 23% by 17 banks, oil and gas 27% by 22 banks, manufacturing 26%. You can only get loan at 26%, and this involves 23 banks. Real estate and construction 26%, 23 banks. General commerce 30% by 21 banks. Mortgage 26%, 20 banks. Transport and communication 24 banks at 26%. And finance and insurance 26% by 23 banks. And government 24%. Anything concerning government is 24% by 21 banks. So if Rhoda wants to start a small business now, you have to prepare your mind that, look, you have to pay as much as 26%.
Yes.
Can that help our economy?
Double-digit interest rates is one of the bane of manufacturing, solid media, and investment in the economy. And this is why the central bank has already come out that it had provided guidelines, and banks who are flouting these guidelines will be taken to task on it. And unless something is done about the high-digit interest rate, all the efforts and initiative to diversify the economy through agriculture, through manufacturing, through solid minerals will just be a little effort. Yes.
And then, you know, that has been a talking point for us here on Good Morning Nigeria, if you can remember very clearly. And the minister has come out to say that the Economic Development Bank, the DBN, of course, probably would help.
Development
Bank of Nigeria would also help to address the issue of a double-digit rate for of course.
Yeah, that's why there is a proposal for the Development Bank of Nigeria that will put together all the development, either in agriculture, housing.
Thank you very much, Bayo. But very quickly, I'd like to read the story on the Punch very, very quickly. It's a man treks, you know, from Lagos to Zaria for his girlfriend. His ex-26-year-old man, Tunde Agbaje, has trekked from Ketu area of Lagos State to Zaria in Kaduna State. And it was Lande Agbaje Donald, of course, is doing this for his 26-year-old girlfriend, who actually, you know, refused his proposal, so he decided to actually trek from Zaria, from Lagos to Zaria, to of course show his love.
Rhoda, that's a very exciting one. How about someone offering to do that for you? What do you think? That would be a good gift, isn't it?
But I will enjoy the end of story. I will enjoy the story if I am aware of the reaction of the lady for that his initiative.
Well, we'll get Rhoda's reaction after this very time. Well, on that note, I'd like to say a special thank you to Bayo for being there always on Good Morning Nigeria to look at what the papers are saying. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, Cliff.
This is still Good Morning Nigeria with special focus on corruption and you in a moment.
Nigerians. Suicide bombers are not spirits. They are not ghosts. They are human beings like you and me. They live amongst us. They are your neighbors. They are your friends today, but terrorists tomorrow. So you must know your neighbor now. Security begins with you and me. Know your neighbor. Be vigilant. Be security conscious. Report suspicious persons, objects, and movements to the police and other security agencies. The security of our nation is a duty for you and me.
If you see something, say something. Nigeria, unite against terrorism. This message is brought to you by the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
Marketing a service like television broadcast that is truly transient and subjective requires some degree of specialized knowledge and skills. Principles and Practice of Marketing is an intensive 4-week knowledge-sharing class that is geared towards television marketing, media buyers, corporate relations heads with some of the pure tools needed to maximize how best to meet the expectations of customers while remaining profitable. All participants will be exposed to key attributes of service marketing in both traditional and new frontiers of electronic media usage, like customer retention, audience priming and rating. The session should not be missed by marketing heads in all radio and television houses, media heads in advertising, public relations agencies, media broadcast, brand support managers, and heads of corporate affairs. Venue, NTA TV College Jaws. Date, 31st October to 26 November 2016. Fees, 100,000 Naira only per participant, accommodation inclusive. NTA Television College Jaws, training you to be the best you want to be.
Welcome back. You're still watching Good Morning Nigeria on Africa's largest television network, the NTA, and our focus this morning is on corruption and you. The level of corruption in Nigeria is still, of course, a favorite topic and discussion all over the country, as the damaging effect of this cankerworm remains evident in every aspect of our national life, to the embarrassment of all Nigerians. Most times, all 5 fingers point to the political class. Is the ordinary citizen culpable or is an innocent victim? Before we begin the conversation on corruption and you, let's take this background report put together by Omotola Omojola.
Corruption is in every sector. Corruption is everywhere. Left you go, you see corruption. Center, you see corruption. You go right, corruption. Behind you, corruption. Everywhere, corruption.
That could almost pass for the general feeling among Nigerians. Corruption is said to have eaten deep into the fabrics of the nation. Nigerians during the colonial era and post-colonial era were people noted to believe in dignity of labor. It was an era when high morals were valued and the nobles were people with such virtues that suggested sound character.
We've had a very successful cabinet meeting this morning. We were talking about our anti-corruption summit. We've got the Nigerians. We've actually got some leaders of some fantastically corrupt countries coming to Britain.
Nigerians didn't take this lightly, and neither did the media around the world, generating reactions from different quarters, both for and against the former UK Prime Minister. Yet, to whatever degree we accept, there is a prevailing tendency for people to perpetrate acts of corruption. A school of thought has posited that the break in the class structure and the quest for fast cash that were noticeable in the 70s were some of the factors that have fanned the flickers of corruption into what is now an inferno, requiring generational effort and collaborative attitudes of allies to put out. From drug peddling to money laundering, political thuggery and the suppression of the media, the elite class has been accused of throwing caution into the air, and the power of the naira seemed to have taken over the rule of law. This has caused a once respectable country in the Committee of Nations to gradually rise on the Global Corruption Index. Nigeria is ranked the 136th least corrupt nation in the world and ranks between 10 to 15 most corrupt nations of the world, depending on who is doing the rating. Some leadership scholars have also submitted that bad followers make bad leaders. The corrupt activities of common Nigerians stare us in the face, and the attitude of share the national cake is obvious in our day-to-day activities. From education to employment, merit is often sacrificed on the altar of nepotism, and sometimes it feels as if you can get nothing if you know no one. Internet scam, a trend among young Nigerians, have made their own contribution to the nation's corruption rating. Rather than condemn, the society hails the corruptly enriched, desisting from asking questions. Some persons have tried to excuse this by citing poverty levels. But the question is, should poverty cause a man to lose his dignity? What choices do you make in your home, among family, at work, and business transactions? Where do you stand in the corruption or anti-corruption equation? The discussion on Good Morning Nigeria today helps us to place you and me.
Credit to Omotola there for setting the stage for the discussion. With that background, so we're ready for the new perspective discussion on the burning issue of corruption under the topic, Corruption and You. Don't forget you are a discussant in this program, and we will be looking forward to hearing from you via our Twitter handle. But right away, we introduce our studio discussants to lead the conversation. First, I take us to Kaduna, from where we're joined by Engineer Abdul Audu, a principal lecturer, former dean, Students Affairs at Kaduna Polytechnic, former chair, Nigerian Society of Engineers, Kaduna branch. It's our pleasure to welcome you there.
Thank you.
We have in the studio, Abuja studio here, Sislike Head, a man that you already know that have been part of this program in the past. Is the Sislike Head of Transparency International Nigeria, Awal Musa Rafanjani. It's my pleasure to have you.
Good morning, all.
All right, we also have joining us here in our Abuja studios, we have Jai Gaskia. He's, of course, a public affairs analyst. Good morning, and thank you for joining us on Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you. Good morning.
And, of course, a very regular here on Good Morning Nigeria. He is Ezenwa Nwaigu. He is head Say No Nigeria Group Civil Society. Welcome to Good Morning Nigeria. All right, thank you very much. Well, let's start this discussion from the perspective we set out to actually look at it from this morning. We've been talking corruption. Ezenwa, I remember that you joined us here not too long ago when we were talking corruption in the judiciary and basically, you know, and other issues, other forms of corruption. But then today we're looking at corruption and the average Nigerian on the street. Let's get your perspective. What would be the definition? Because most times when we talk corruption, we're talking corruption in high places, we're talking corruption in terms of fraud, bribe, all sorts of corruption. But then when we talk about corruption now from the citizenry, from the average man on the street, how would we define that kind of corruption? Is there one?
Oh, I see. The sense that I get always is when the conversation gets to the ordinary citizen. In my view, we're trying to help the corrupt. We're trying to make them comfortable because everybody seems to think, the very corrupt, those who are involved in grand corruption, seems to think that everybody is corrupt, and so that makes them very comfortable. In the sense in which we are talking about it, we are talking about petty corruption. Petty corruption in the sense of you tell your mechanic to go and buy parts for, and he takes the money and buys probably fake fake products for you, and then installs that, and then takes money for the genuine, or you break the traffic light and all of those kind of things. Those are petty corruption. But the impact, the impact is not anything compared to the monumental grand corruption that we are seeing in our country. That eventually helps to incentivize the petty corruption. And what I mean by that is that when people take away huge sums of money meant for health, for instance, so this mechanic that I'm talking about is afraid that if he has to go to the hospital and there are no drugs in those hospitals, he has to go to private hospital and he has to pay more. So he's under some kind of pressure to make ends meet illegitimately, if you like. So for me, I think the concentration most of the time should be placed much more on the grand corruption. Once we are able to deal with that, the petty thieves would sort themselves out, in my view.
But then, how petty is petty corruption? When you say petty corruption, how petty is it?
Essentially, when it can cost a life, that little petty corruption.
No, in terms of definition, there is, you look at when I talk about impact. Okay, the lives, every life that is lost diminishes us. That's true and that's real. But now imagine when you talk about child mortality rate, when you talk about maternal mortality rate, and then you look at the figures, you look at the statistics that we bring out, it's humongous. It makes you feel that, in much more sense. What I'm saying is that they are interlinked, but the narrative that goes around the discussion around petty corruption is to make the grand corrupt people very comfortable, to have that feeling that, look, don't worry, everybody. But we were not always like that. Let's make that point.
Okay. Well, if you still have something to...
Yes, and I'm saying that to underscore that the ordinary people we refer to still have a sense of dignity, especially when you look at how they relate with people who are corrupt. If you for instance, go to where I come from, and the source of your wealth is not very well known, people will, you bring a new car, they celebrate with you, but they ask, what does he do? And that's the important part for me.
You're trying to draw a line and weigh the burden of the heftiness of the burden on possibly the one you say the big corruption. The grand corruption thing. But let's go to Jai, because in Nigeria, it is a common cliche to say that institution has eaten deep into the fabrics of all Nigeria. In fact, that is institutionalized. And when we talk about this, people appear to take it as a way of life. What is your take on this?
Yeah, I think that's the sense in which it is important to actually be able to contextualize both the difference as well as the relationship between grand and petty corruption. It's absolutely not possible for petty corruption to thrive if there is no context of grand corruption. And the reason is simple here. Human societies are organized societies. And in human societies, you place some trust in some people as leaders of the society. And this has been from the moment humanity began to organize in societies. So, and if those people who have been placed in position of trust, if they mismanage the trust, what they're essentially doing and saying is to say that, okay, look, we are breaking the bounds. The reason why we have come together, the reason why we think we are human and we have come together is no longer necessary. And therefore, they make it possible for others to break those rules and to break those bounds. Now, so having said that, it is important to then go back to the issue of, when you talk about petty corruption, everyday corruption that happens, routine corruption that happens all over the place, in the home, at work, and so on and so forth. But ask yourself this question. So what are the examples of this kind of petty corruption? So in the home, for example, a parent tries to pay for the examination of a child. I mean, and that happens frequently now. So you ask yourself, why does it happen frequently? Because the institutions that are supposed to run exams and to run schools have become degenerate. If those institutions are impervious to this, You know, because it takes two to be corrupt. So I come to you and I say, oh, I want to pay so that my child can pass. If that institution is not corrupt and is not aiding corruption and is not promoting corruption outside of the public domain, in the private domain, then that kind of thing is what you will report. That, okay, look, an attempt has been made to subvert the system. But because the institutions themselves are corrupt, and that's why it's important that the focus really should be on making the systems and the institutions work. Because the idea of every time we want to talk about very significant things in our lives, even the economy, the idea of saying that we can transform it by the way you and I, behave, by the way you and I invest, alone would not solve the problem. That's why it's important that we go to that place. But also, it's also important, I agree, that we should point out some of these things, all of these things. And like Eze said, Nigerians have not always been corrupt.
Well, we'll be looking at the fact that if we should search our conscience and try to do the right thing, at whatever level, at whatever vocation we find ourselves, it will be better for our country. Like the leadership emergence process, in the process of submitting yourself to emerge as a leader, that you don't have to pay or collect something from that person that wants to emerge. The person might not get in at the top, get to prefer or, put hand in certain things that will amount to the grand corruption that we'll talk about. I think we take this to Kaduna before we come to Rafsanjani, because you've been doing a lot of work in the area of corruption, and let's find the index and that. But Kaduna, what is your take on all this? You've had the submissions of Ezenwa and Jay on this very issue, corruption and you. What comes to your mind?
Very much. I disagree with Mr. Ezenwa on that. Corruption is everywhere, as we all know, and it affects every part of the Nigerian society. There is no reason why we should differentiate between corruption at the top and corruption at the bottom, because it is the bottom that breeds the people that fill up the leadership position at the top. So I don't see why we should differentiate. So we should deal with it at every level of the society. For example, the teacher that does not go to class on time, or that goes to class and refuses to teach, or asks students for gratifications before they pass and all the rest, is already teaching the students or the children that it pays to be corrupt. You need to get something before you pay something before you become a successful student, a successful graduate of your particular course or program, as the case may be. And by the time that person goes up to become a leader somewhere in the society, he will also perpetrate the act that made him to succeed in graduating from school. And that makes it a very endemic problem that we are facing now. So we cannot separate it from the two. And to look at it very carefully, in production, we don't count a waste on one person, we count the cumulative waste. For example, if I'm supposed to be in the class by 8 o'clock and leave the class by 10 o'clock, that is 2 hours lecture, and I have 40 students in the class, and I do not go to class for that day for no reason, for no justifiable reason, it is not 2 hours that Nigeria had lost. Nigeria had lost 80 man-hours, not 2 hours. Nigeria lost 80 man-hours, and that is a lot as far as the economy of Nigeria is concerned. Now, look at it that those 80 students, I'm an engineer, and I teach in mechanical engineering class. If those students are not properly taught, they move on to work in the society. They move on to work in the industries. Some of them may become teachers themselves. Some become bankers. They work in all facets of the Nigerian economy. They will go on with the same attitude. Whereas it is my duty as a teacher to mold them in character and in learning. If I don't do that well, certainly there is no how those students will be good citizens of Nigeria. So the corruption at the top is only a resultant effect of what started from the early stages of life of many Nigerians. Somebody there just mentioned the issue of parents paying for their children's examination. I and you, when we went to school, sometimes your parents do not even know where your school is located. Especially those of us that are schooled outside our towns or our states of origin, as the case may be. Our parents never knew where we went to school. But these days, parents will follow up everything. And sometimes when I tell parents not to come to my office or not to approach me for their children, that as a teacher, it's my responsibility to take care of them, they feel very bad. So it has come to a point that Nigerians are so used to doing things the wrong way, and we have come to accept the wrong things as the right thing. And that is exactly where the problem lies. So it is very important that we look at corruption in all ramifications, that it is corrupting the minds of our people, it is corrupting the system. So the system that you are talking about that does not reject or is not impervious to corruption is also being operated by Nigerians who pass through the same system that we are complaining about. So everybody have a role to play. So I and you have a role to play in averting corruption in the Nigerian society. And that means we must do our work conscientiously, but with patriotism and with all dedication as far as it is possible. So it is a serious issue that we cannot limit to one section alone. Even though we know that the grandiose level at which politicians and other politically exposed persons perpetrate corruption is heavy and is massive on the society. But we should not lose sight of the fact that what we do individually give us a cumulative effect of what we are seeing today.
All right, thank you very much, Engineer Audu. But we'll get back to you in the course of discussion. But then let's get the views of Raf Sanjani. You listened to Ezenwa and Jaye Gaskia. And the question that comes to my mind is, it's being a subject of discussion because we're saying, is it an issue of strong institutions or building strong personalities? Because the truth is, these are people who also, the people that make up the institution, just as Engineer Audu said, are people who also came out of the society. So is it an issue of building strong personality or building strong institutions?
Thank you very much. I think all the views expressed here, they are all relevant and they're all important, and it shows the importance, of the discussion that we are having, this morning. The two, as it has been rightly mentioned, they are all interlinked, and you can't actually, completely ignore one and, take one, But I want to say that when we are talking about grand political corruption, we are talking about the kind of corruption that gives, room to those other petty corruptions that we are talking about. For example, the grand political corruption involves changing the law to favor you. Clearly you want to amend the law in your favor so that, that law will continue to protect you or will continue to waive certain, things that you ought to actually, be, giving to the state, That's a corruption. Or you change the electoral law to favor you, the electoral corruption, but you corner the budget, when there's a budget, the budget disappeared. We have seen in this country where contractors collected 100% payment and they never even visited the site. NTA covered that, preceding the National Assembly during the power proofs. They confessed that they collected 100% payment and they never visited the site. That's a kind of grand corruption we are talking about. Or the extractive companies that they refuse to pay, the taxes that they are supposed to pay, That's corruption at high level, Then you are talking about the corruption that police and maybe security officers do respect, do collect, 20 naira, 10 naira. It is because of the collapse of the institutions and the deficit in the morals that, we find ourselves. That's how those things are happening. Because also, if the taxi man did not pay that 20 naira, he or she will even lose his life. And we have seen it, a lot of police, kill people because of 20 naira. A lot, in fact, even in the, NTA, in the news, it has been reported on how careless some people, because of just simple bribe or 10 naira or 20 naira, as it were, they take the life of ordinary person. So even if you find out that as individual, even if you try to resist those things, you lose your life, and nobody come to rescue you because of the collapse of the institution. Because you can't go and lay complaint and your complaint being attended to. In fact, the very people that you are going to lay your complaint to, are the one that are actually perpetuating this kind of sin, So what is the option? What do you do? That is why the grant corruption has to be addressed, so that the law, the institutions, the compliance of the laws are actually, in full force, so that, the consequences. If you collect and you are reported and there's evidence to that, you know what you have done, and nobody is going to spare you. But in a situation whereby the sin will be interpreted, and in these days now, where we see monumental corruption, some, with due respect, some, lawyers and judges would go and just argue in favor of the people who have looted, destroyed our collective wealth, stolen it, to say that they are not even corrupt or they have not done anything, as we have seen how they exonerated so many high-profile political corrupt people, So it is very difficult. As much as it is important that we deal with issues of, the petty corruption, where ordinary Nigerians, in desperation, like, for example, pile, if you go to office, if you come to NTA, probably, not NTA, if you go to if you go to an office, if you are going to an office, ordinary clerk, will hide their file, you have to tip something, It is because he saw that thing is happening at a higher level, and nobody is cautioning that, nobody is, stopping that. But I tell you, today, in NTA, if the time for resumption is 7 o'clock, and the GM and all the big principal officers are here before 7, I tell you, this ordinary clerk or small worker would not make mistake of coming after 7. But what is happening is that because there's no leadership role, there's no model in the leadership, people do whatever they want to do because the oga don't come to the office in most cases, So it is important. It is important that we have people that you can see as a role model, so that if you know that you are not corrupt, I can assure you that your subordinate will not be, because they will know that no, oga will not try. Don't try that thing.
Let's try to look at this, because you've just mentioned very interesting examples. The probe at the National Assembly, you brought it to the office level, and prior to this very program, we set up an imaginary debate between Rhoda, Cliff, and my producer, Kande Daniel. And we try to say the political elite and the common man, who should be blamed? Should this blame be on, how much blame, go to the elite or the political class, and how much blame go to maybe the common man? It's just like the chicken and egg theory, which one comes first? Okay. The corrupt citizen or the corrupt government?
Okay.
What is your take?
The reason why we are paying emphasis on the big corrupt, actors is because their action affects millions.
Which comes first?
So, in other words, the political corruption or the big, high grand corruption has more impact on the lives of Nigerians than those individual corruption. Because if you steal money that is meant for provision of healthcare system or for education or for, road construction, and people keep on having accidents, and in the hospital there's no drugs, directors, have no money, or there's a ghost workers, thing. You are impacting on the many lives, Whereas, as example was given, a mechanic that has gone to buy a spare part, for a customer, it is between him and that,
and it could cause an accident.
And of course, it can cause accident. But when you look at the millions of the people where billions of naira, that have been stolen, that is meant for the provision of health care system, for education, for water, for infrastructure, for other social services, for even the electricity, and somebody just siphon that money and nothing happens, it affects the life of people, it affects the development.
We need to get their input.
So it is important that we are very clear.
I can be very, very clear and state very clearly which one comes first, grand corruption. How did it happen? Let's look at our history. Just take Nigeria as an example and look at the trajectory of the history of Nigeria from independence. So when you begin to look at, were Nigerians this corrupt in the First Republic? I mean, all citizens. Were we talking of corruption as being institutionalized, as being as pervading all of society in the First Republic? Were we saying that even under the first military interregnum, things have progressed gradually because the top has gotten rotten, you know, gradually over time. So no, and then you mentioned the question of because I want to go back to the example of the what's it called? The the mechanic, and then you mentioned that it will cost life. Yeah. And the question is this: you said the mechanic bought a fake product. How did the fake product get into the system? I mean, that's the question. So this idea of trying to blame individuals in societies where we have put institutions in place. The reason why we put institutions, it does not. It does not. It does not. No, excuse me. It does not. Okay. But if there are no fake products, I mean, look at, you have rules in your office. You have principles. You have rules to guide you. Why do we put the rules there? If we are just to assume that you will naturally on your own obey rules, why do we need to put the regulations? It's because we know that naturally there might be tendency for us not to obey rules. That's why we put rules there, and then we put institutions there to make sure that everyone, high or low, then obey those rules. Once those institutions fail, then everybody goes on their way.
But then I'd like to use this administration as an example. Yeah. We've had these institutions before now. We had the EFCC, we had ICPC. Why was corruption still eating it? Because now we are having just one personality, which people seem to have issues with that. Okay, if that person is not there anymore, or when the tenure is over, how do we build on this and that? I'm talking about the president now.
Absolutely, ma'am.
That's an individual that has come out of the society.
And it is the wrong way to fight corruption. I am not one of those. We are doing a lot, okay? But we cannot sustain it this way because we are not dealing with the institutions that need to fight corruption. ICPC is not the only institution. EFCC is not the only institution. How many cadres of EFCC and ICPC, you know, have been empowered enough to even take action, you know, contrary to their chairman or director? And then you are talking about the tail end of corruption. Corruption starts from where? So where is the audit? Where is the Auditor General's office? Are we strengthening that office to perform its role? Where is the Accountant General's office? Are we strengthening it? Is the National Assembly, are the National Assembly committees performing their oversight functions? Where is the Public Accounts Committee of the National Assembly? Where are the different audit units in the MDAs? Are they being strengthened? The audit unit in NTA, for example, is it strengthened? Is it empowered to carry out its job? Because that's where you stop and flag off corruption.
And do you have the right people
there? Manning the institutions.
The right people, again, because people are corrupt. So how did people get how do people get employed?
Let's get the view of
because by letters from people.
is itching to make a contribution here.
It's not about itching. I think we're saying the same thing, but we are placing a lot of primacy. We are placing a primacy on what is important. And what if we deal with it, we'll be able to solve the problems. See, why do you have pews and pulpits? Why is it that you have a pulpit? You have a pew, okay? So if you have, it's about responsibility. It's about roles. Now, if I find my pastor, if I see the pastor of my church coming out of a use petty corruption, that's not the point. But we understand and we are clear about it, and we're not making any pretense to the contrary that, listen, if you screw up, plug the holes for grand corruption, the tendency for the petty thieves to disappear would be very, very, very high. And let me also say this. When people talk about EFCC, ICPC, those are indications of a collapse. Yeah. The setup of these institutions is indication that something is wrong with our policing system. Yeah. Which country in the world, tell me that country in the world where people can sit down, sign out money, just go sign out money. You are the one who approves, you are the one who goes to collect. The Accountant General Office, the Auditor General's Office, deliberately have been so decimated, have been made to be completely useless in such a way that it cannot even interfere with its own definite functions. The police has special fraud units. The police has traffic section. The police has The police has, what do you call it now? You have set up a Federal Road Safety Commission. You have set up ICPC. You have set up, all you are saying is that this institution, this very institution that has responsibility to oversight citizen morality cannot do its job in a democracy. And that is the impact of military rule. And we are not facing it. We think that by eulogizing the episodic, the dramatic, activities of these institutions, that we have solved the problem. Those who took over.
I think you've made a very... I know that Kaduna is itching to make input in this very conversation, where to locate the blame and what are those attributes that amount to corruption. Engineer Abdul.
Everybody is still talking around the point I made earlier. We need to build from the bottom, because no matter how we say it, that young man that is 15 years old or 18 years old that is in school today will grow up to become somebody in the society someday, to work in the same institution that we're talking about strengthening. So what do we need to do? We need to overhaul our educational system and ensure that there is discipline, there is a high-level performance. Just what we used to have should come back in the educational system so that people can be molded in character and learning. When wealth is lost, nothing is lost. When health is lost, something is lost. But when character is lost, you have lost everything. And you will all agree with me that in our society today, so many citizens have no character anymore. Our attitude towards the society is not something we should be proud of. So anyhow we turn around the grammar, it is still the citizen that we're talking about that will go up to fill the spaces in those institutions that were clamoring for their being strengthened. The policeman passed through a school. The policeman passed through a society. The policeman is a member of a society. Here in this country, somebody will get up and start organizing people to carry placards to demonstrate that leave our daughter, leave our son, don't persecute our son because somebody is being taken to the court or the FCC is probing before corruption. The latest one is even very annoying. The EFCC had not even called on her yet. She was the one that came out to say, okay, that money you are talking about with Dudafa is my money. And it's okay, if it's your money, come and prove it. She is the same person that went to court, but people are carrying placards to demonstrate on her behalf. What kind of society are we trying to run? That means the citizenry should also be sensitized. That all the institutions that we have shows that they are not doing enough. But they are not doing enough because they are not prepared to do enough. Whether you talk of funding, you talk of whatever you talk of, if the individuals that man these institutions are properly prepared from the onset, that is, if their minds have been made up, have been built up in such a way that they are averse to corruption, it will not pass through them. Because that big man that carries money from the central bank did not go there to carry it himself in most cases. The driver helps to carry it. The policeman helps to guard it. So many other citizens help in the process of packing the money, going to count it in his home, and so on and so forth. So we really have to look at it in a very holistic level. But it is very important, as everybody has said, that we deal with the grand corruption because it is what we are seeing. It is the one that is massively affecting the society, as it is said. Like I gave an analogy in the beginning. If somebody steals money, you look at the number of hospitals and the number of patients that would have gone through those hospitals that are not being treated, the amount of drugs that are not available in the hospital, the academics also have their own issues with government, issues of allowances not being paid and so on and so forth. But somebody is somewhere packing the money. So the grand corruption is also a very serious problem in our society. But in as much as we face the fighting of grand corruption, we must also be ready to fight corruption at all levels. So the blame cannot be placed on just one aspect. But I must say that our educational system needs to be properly overhauled. If we overhaul our educational system and people grow up to hate corruption, people grow up to hate indiscipline, because a society that has no character will have no discipline. That is why the issue of character is very important. So if people grow up to hate all these things, then it will not be perpetrated at the institutional level. No judge what is onions will now be able to come out and start defending an unearned amount of money found in his possession, and so on and so forth. The citizens too will not be bold enough to come and say they were defending our son. These days, it has come to a level that if you are made a commissioner today and you don't go to build houses in your village, houses in your state capital, houses in Abuja, and maybe in one other city of Nigeria, and maybe in London, you come back home, some members of the community will start making jest of you, that you went, you came back with nothing, and so on and so forth. Whereas it is not supposed to be so. So we have turned a lot of things upside down because of the way we perceive development, because of the way we perceive growth as far as the society is concerned. So we must still go back to the basics. We must return certain things that we have taken out of our educational system. Somebody mentioned the people of the old. They were governed, and a lot of things were done. And yet, we didn't see some of those old first-generation leaders with properties all over Nigeria. We have a very good example in the north. The studio, this structure I'm sitting in today, was constructed under the leadership of Sir Ahmadu Bello, Sardauna of Sokoto. You get so many structures he did in this city and all over the north, and yet the man does not have any mansion, any building at all, not even one bedroom bungalow in Kaduna City, where he stayed and ruled as the premier of Northern Region. And yet his name is all over the place. Streets in Lagos, streets in Abuja, streets in Kaduna, structures are named after him. And people keep on remembering him with passion. So that is, are we building people to look at Nigeria like that? Are we building people to think of leadership in that direction? Or we are building leaders that will only think of themselves, like what we are having in the terms of those who are busy amending some laws to suit them because they are now under prosecution. Just some days back, the Senate passed amendment bill for the CCB to the CCB Act. Is that desirable? That is another grand corruption. But at the end of the day, you still see people in hundreds demonstrating in support of those elements in that particular aspect, part of Nigerian governance system, that they are being persecuted. It's so annoying and so painful. So those young men that carry placards, you will not see anybody above 50 to 60 coming out to demonstrate in support of this type of people. It is the young people that are being used, and that is why our educational system must be taken care of. Anyhow we look at the whole situation, we must come back to look at our educational system. It is very, very important. So if somebody gets up today, tomorrow if you become the Senate president, if Rafsanjani, my friend there, becomes the Senate president tomorrow, and there's something against him, he will now move to amend the law. And then some youths will start hovering all over the social media, campaigning for him, talking, insulting the president, and so on and so forth, that he's been persecuted because he's so and so. Whereas we want the right thing to be done. So the young man that is coming up will even be more dangerous. I still remember the case of, we are talking of grand corruption, yes, but I still remember the case of Professor Musa Ali Jibril, also when he was executive secretary of JAMB. He went to somewhere in the South to invigilate himself, and he was in the hall. And a particular young man was with a plaster of Paris, but always close to his ears. And he observed that the young man was talking into the POP. By the time he drew down the hand, a handset was inside. And the young man was listening to questions and answers from the handset and was shading in JAMB question paper. And when they traced to the house that his father was in the house with a teacher working the JAMB questions for him, and they were communicating to him. But he came to the hall with a POP, whereas a GSM handset was hidden in the POP. That's what happened. So this thing goes along the way. That same young man may turn out to become a lecturer tomorrow, or a military officer tomorrow, or a senator, or a member of the National Assembly tomorrow. And what do you think this man will look at the society? How do you think he will want to chart his way to leadership in the society? These are things that we must really look at, because I'm only trying to talk from the perspective of the topic that we have today, that is corruption and you. How are you affected by corruption, or how are you going to help in fighting corruption, averting corruption in your own way. I know the grand corruption that others are talking about is very important, but we really, really have to look at these things from the basics and tackle it so that we can have people who are in the system. If I'm a clerk today and a big man comes to me to change some figures in my accounts book, I will tell him I cannot do it because I've already been built up character-wise to be averse to corruption. If that is not done, we will still continue to have problems. So because the young men coming up are even more vicious when it comes to corrupt tendencies. I must tell you this. I've also seen a case whereby I will still continue to use my own practice as an example, where a young man will sit in the exam hall and he'll be drawing a thread from outside because somebody has tied for some papers, what we call chokes from outside. That is answered questions from outside because somebody tied it to the end of it, a little thread for him there, and he would draw it through the window and bring it into the hall because you must search him before he entered the hall. Or a situation whereby a student who wants to cheat will use masking tape and paste some whatever malpractice questions and the rest at the back of the invigilator. As he walks through to the front, the person who is the target recipient will just remove it off the dress of the invigilator and goes on. So these same people come up in the society, and these are the same people that form leaders tomorrow. We say the youth are the leaders of tomorrow. So we must face the youth and build them to be averse to corruption so that the system will gradually become impervious even from the bottom. And because when the low person fight, it will be more vicious than the ones at the top. So we will be able to fight corruption seriously and effectively.
Thank you very much, Engineer Audu. You've raised a lot of talking points here, lots of issues. But then, one thing that still comes to my mind is the way that we are categorizing corruption. Corruption is corruption, grand or petty? But then you are now, you brought us to the extent to make us understand that individuals make up these institutions. But when we come back, I'd like to also look at the fact that is it a change of attitude, or some people have said it should be a change of thought pattern. But then just to let our viewers also know that we're getting your tweets. They're coming in via our Twitter handle at NTAGMN. We'll take a break now. When we come back, we'll take some of your tweets, and also to let you know that you can still continue to be a part of this conversation by tweeting at us at NTAGMN. We'll be back in just a moment.
Who are you and what is your predicament?
Please, I'm looking for Candy. Who is living here? In this compound?
Oh no, this is a premises. A compound is an amalgam of chemicals, and there is no Candy living in this premises.
This week on your award-winning comedy series, Professor John Bull, starring Kanayo Okanayo, Mercy Johnson, Queen Wokoye, Funky Malam, Bimbo Akintola, Ime Bishop, Yomi Fash Lanso, MC for God.
Who was you? What was you found?
Auntie, I look at you. I going to look for my sister. I know you are for.
Here. And he was found the place. Call me. Okay?
Say somebody.
She's definitely not my sister.
Shut up!
Professor John Bull, fasten your seatbelts this Tuesday and Friday, 8:30 to 9 p.m. on NTA Network, International, and Star Times. It's absolutely bombastic.
Over and out. The largest data network, Glow, grandmasters of data.
With an increasingly volatile economy, there has never been a more fitting time to own your space and carve out new opportunities. Join over 1,000 women at the 15th Women in Management, Business and Public Service WIMBIZ Annual Conference as we discuss the next frontier, new landscape, new possibilities. Topics include beyond parity, inspiring the next generation of female leaders, women in mining, unlocking the Nigerian mining opportunities, and the billion naira tourism industry, monetizing the beauty within, among other topics. Date is Thursday the 3rd and Friday the 4th of November 2016. And the venue, Echo Hotel and Suites, Victoria Island, Lagos. It starts at 8 a.m. prompt daily. To register, visit www.wimbizannualconference.com or call 0803-594-6249. WIMBIZ, 15 years of inspiring and empowering women.
Well, you're still on Good Morning Nigeria, where discussion still centers on corruption and you. You've had different perspectives. Now we want to buy into what Nigerians are saying on corruption and you. And we have some tweets here. First, we have Mike Anyako. He says, corruption has eaten deep into the fabric of all strata of our society. The president can't fight it alone. The fight begins with me.
And Ibrahim Tudu tweets, are you looking for who is to blame? Ask Japan. More government officials and politicians are executed than any citizen. They are the culprit. He also says the real side to blame is in corruption is who benefits the most. The subjects are forced to give corruption by the people in authority.
And Sani Michael Omokaji says the blame game has lost public interest among Nigerians and the fight against corruption seems sectional instead of being holistic.
And of course, he tweets again and says Nigerians are willing to turn a new leaf, but our leaders' extravagant lifestyle is not helping matters. Change begins with them.
And we have Chibuzo Jonathan saying the only way to deal with corruption is letting people pay for their offense by putting them in jail from the high post to the lowest.
And Donatus Abo says the concentration should be on the public office holder since their actions affect the citizens on a grand scale.
And Oladimeji Olani says that what we need to do now is for every one of us to forget about the past and search forward by focusing on doing things right without compromise.
And we have here Oladimeji Olani. He says, trying to get an external gain while doing our job, we must not help or assist people to, curb corruption, and Nigeria will get better.
And Jamiu Sadara says, we must let our past go, as living in the past is inevitable, but change must begin with us to build Nigeria of our dreams.
Wale Amu says, who is the corrupt, police or the Nigerian state? If informants on corrupt practices goes to prison for 10 months before being proved innocent.
And of course, Simon Obwenna says, ordinary Nigerians are first victims of corruption perpetrated by leaders. Petty corruption is caused by failure of leadership.
And Charles Mark Wilson says corruption in Nigeria is like a cancer that affects everything. We all know it began with leaders and so must end at their hand.
And Annie Kingsley says, I think corruption is corruption whether perpetrated by the ruler of the ruled, but institutional corruption is the most pronounced.
Well, this one is from Maman. He says, the guest from Kaduna knows exactly where the rot of corruption is. Corruption is seriously born in our institutions.
We have an avalanche of tweets from Nigerians, but we can't take all. We'll just continue with the conversation and find time to accommodate more tweets. Now, let's go to Ezenwa. You had the reaction of Nigerians. And the body now we're talking about, what can the common man, since you came in with a position that is more heavy from the top. What can the common man do to checkmate the corrupt tendencies or actions of our leaders?
I'm amused much more because I was just reflecting now. We talk about prison congestion. The citizens are paying heavily for infractions against the law. And that's why the prisons are congested. The politically exposed persons steal billions of naira and get 250,000 naira fine. So what, in my view, is the challenge is the absence of law and order. Once you have that challenge, then whether it is petty or grand, once people can't be sanctioned, then there's a problem. And when people, my friend from Kaduna kept on talking about, revitalizing the educational system, which is a campaign that I'm involved in. But I also reflect back and say, hey, the people who are putting their hands in the public till today are products of Ahmadiyya Secondary School. They are products of St. Finbar's. They are products of CMS Grammar School. And what does that tell you? That tells you in real terms that you need much more than moral education. You need much more than sermonizations. You need to enforce until, for instance, you begin to see presidents of the country, former presidents of the country in prison over corruption, if you cannot find a judge in prison over corruption, if you cannot find a Senate president in prison over corruption, you are just sermonizing. What we'll be doing will be just blaming the victim. The victim of grand corruption is the one that we want to put all the blame on and make him feel worthless and completely dehumanized by even actions of people who are already, working against them and are not paying any price. We have resources. We have produced trillions of naira which have been stolen by people in government. How many of those people are in prison today? But just check it. Go to just Kuje prison. You will find out that you will find this mechanic that I talked about. You find many of them there, who the people they cheated took to the magistrate court, and the magistrate remanded them in prison. But we have not been able to get any judge, in spite of the avalanche of evidences that is available to the corruption in the judiciary. Not one judge is in prison today, in spite of the fact that resources have been stolen from us, and we know that there has been direction from the top. No president of Nigeria, former or serving, is in prison. What kind of country are we building when the only people who will be in your prison are your citizens, your ordinary citizens? They are the ones in your prison. And you are asking me who is to blame. When 10% of your citizens have no access to your...
What do we need to do?
What you need to do is to, I've told you, send them to prison. Let them go to prison. You are still asking me what? Until you have a judge in prison, and this ordinary man sees that this judge is in prison, it will begin to correct his mind that this law is not meant just for him.
Well, sending them to prison still falls back to those political leaders. We're talking from the people's perspective.
Okay, from the people's perspective.
We know the people talk about civil society and civil disobedience and all that.
Sorry, you know the reason why I'm not persuaded. If you notice, it is not because I don't know the argument. Okay? Don't make the mistake that I don't know the argument. I understand the argument and the role of the citizen. But I'm telling you, with every sense of humility, that go to your prison and find who is in the prison. It is your citizens. They are already paying the heavy price. Let me tell you, if I break the traffic light, I will be charged. If a top government official breaks traffic light, he is given a salute. What kind of system is from
Brother, I know you have a question for Ezenwa before we let him go. Brother, you have
Ezenwa, I know you're pressed for time and you'd love to leave us really soon. But then I want to take you on our electioneering process as regards this issue. Because if we look at our electioneering process, it's always a time for us to make decisions as per the leaders that we want at every point in time. But then we still find that voters remain gullible, ignorant, and you begin to wonder if you haven't done well as a governor and there's another election. It's an opportunity for me to make the change that I want to see. But at the same time, what we saw recent elections, now the issues that civil society are even dealing with is inducement of voters. We see voters collecting stipends. Stipends. I mean stipend. And I say to myself, what would you expect from that if a government gives you or a party agent gives you stipend just to vote? I'm asking, can you question the administration? Can you question? So what can we do in terms of ignorance and how gullible voters have become?
I think we offend the sensibilities of our people if we say they are gullible. They are deliberate. They are very deliberate. Deliberate in the sense that I don't like the use of the word inducement. That does not play in our country. There's a deliberate, and I underscore that word. Inducement is when you are forced to take what you don't want to take. Okay. If you take the Edo example, for instance, it was festival. I didn't even think that the Edo people knew that that vote buying was an offense. And
are you serious?
Yes, the way it came out showed to the world that they didn't understand that it was an electoral offense. And let me tell you, it was the two dominant political parties setting their vehicles in polling centers. When you vote, if you voted for Party A, you go to the vehicle of Party A and take your money. If you voted for Party B, you go to Party B and take your money. So you can't be using the word inducement. It's a deliberate program of the sins.
So are you saying it's an ignorance?
No, it's not ignorance. Let me tell you what has happened. That's where I was going to. When I said it's deliberate, First is that I confronted somebody in Edo State, and I said, we have no right to demand for good governance with the way we have behaved in this election. And he told me they go come back again. This 2,000 why I collect so may be all that I get. It is not a justification. But I'm just telling you that those use of words, ignorance, inducement, does not apply. We need to begin to tell our people that they need to go, that they will be paying a price, a huge price, because they don't see the connection between the 2,000 naira they have collected and the lack of drugs in the hospital.
So what do you call that? I'm taking you on this because what do you call that? How do we get people? Because you're saying now that you don't think that these people were aware that this is what is being, they don't see it as an offense. How do we begin to change the consciousness, the thought pattern of people to understand that
good governance will do that. And why I tell you so is that people sometimes talk about conscientization, talk about voter education. That is going, NTA does a lot of it. Other media organizations have done quite a lot. The EMB has done quite a lot. But let's face it, the advert for cigarettes has not stopped people from, smokers will die young, has not stopped people from buying more and more packets of cigarettes. So what we need to do is to begin to, like I said, sanction law and order. If the policeman who has responsibility to oversight law and order during election is himself complicit in the sharing, then there's a problem. So until he arrests somebody, excuse me, just 1 minute. In Kano State, there are electoral offenders who are in prison today. In Kano State, they are in prison today, and many of them because of electoral offenses. But what we saw in Edo, like I said, is a festival in which the man who has responsibility to arrest the person who is vote buying is himself coordinating it. Is himself. So his absence of law and order.
It's not funny. It's not funny, Wago. I think you've made very good point. This is done even with the cameras there, with the law enforcement agents. And we're looking forward to a time when we reverse what obtains in Nigerian prisons, where the common man dominating the number of awaiting trials is reversed, to the political elite, taking that number. I think that's what the point you're making. On that note, I'd like to say special thanks to Ezenwa Wago, who is the head Say No Nigeria group.
Say No Campaign.
Say No Campaign. It's a special group, civil society group, and we thank you so much for the job you're doing. Thank you so much for finding time to be part of this conversation.
Thank you.
I think from here, we're moving now to, let's come to Kaduna. Kaduna, I think Kaduna has not made much input here. So for 1 minute, let's get a summary of the whole thing. What should we do going forward, looking at the place of the common man, in this whole issue of corruption? What can the common man do to hold the elite to account?
Thank you very much. At this point, I agree with Mr. Ezenwa on this score, that people should be punished. When the common man sees that people get punished, he will also change in certain ways. But what the common man should do is to reject inducement, is to reject being corrupted by the leaders, so to say. But how do they get to understand it? Like he said, what he saw in Edo State was a festival. But somebody also said it seems as if the people did not even know that what they were doing was a crime. But he also went ahead to say that even the law enforcement officers were there, also taking part in the sharing process. So at the end of the day, you still come back to my point that we need to help the common man to get to understand what is coming out before him. If not, the disaster will be much more than what we are contending with today. So we need the ICPC, the AFCC, all other agencies that fight corruption, all agencies that work for government, Federal Ministry of Information, National Orientation Agency, should get seriously involved. I want to see us going back to those days where even in the local villages, OB vans were going around showing films, educating the citizenry about certain things, certain aspects of national life. That is no longer happening today. So the citizens need to be educated. And we're not talking of education, formal education in the classroom. I'm talking of education in all ramifications of it, because to be educated is different from being literate. Somebody can be literate without being educated. So to be educated goes much more than being literate. So we need to educate the common man to help him or her to understand what is happening. Because like the person who collected 2,000 obviously do not know that he has already sold all the good governance indices that he needed to get from that 2,000 he had collected. So even if the person did not perform tomorrow, he will just have no reason to complain, as the rest of the citizenry are going to complain. And we must run away from this culture of accepting overtly corrupt people in our midst. And we should also learn, in Nigeria today, once you are very, very, very upright, once you want to insist that things must be done the right way, you are considered to be a wicked person. Go back to your offices, you understand what I'm talking about. If you insist on the right thing being done, people will run away from you. Nobody wants to bring their files to you because they believe that you are wicked. It has happened to so many of us, those of us who are not ready to compromise on certain issues. People will say you are wicked. I will know the names. Some persons are being called in government today because of the stance they take on certain issues. And we know how people demonstrate. Like I said earlier, I don't need to repeat that. But people keep on demonstrating on behalf of people who are corrupt. So we need to educate people from the grassroots. We must not take them to the classroom to get them educated. We can educate them informally through various means. I've mentioned the various media, the various agencies that can participate in that education. But the National Registration Agency, to me, is not doing enough. Federal Ministry of Information should please wake up and design programs for the various agencies under it. I must say that NTA is doing enough because they are coming up with various programs. But we still need to do more because the person in the village may not even have light because of corruption. But he will still, the politician will still go back to him and he will still accept the position because of inducement. And simply because he is not aware of what he is supposed to do, what his rights are, and what his privileges are.
On that note, I'd like to say special thanks to you that we need a lot of enlightenment to put the common man in the right position to take decisions without being influenced, by all the inducements or the ignorance that appear to be dominant at present. We'll have the principal lecturer, former dean, students affairs at Kaduna Polytechnic, and former chairman, Nigerian Society of Engineers, Kaduna branch. That's talking about Engineer Abdul Audu. It's my pleasure to have you on Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Nigerians. Thank you very much.
All right, very quickly, let's get the views of Jai Gaskia. Your final thoughts on this. Can the average, because you seem to be of the view that it has to be taken care of from the top and not just the average Nigerian. But then, is there anything that the average Nigerian can do? Some people have argued that, I'm at the bottom, there's little or nothing I can do. But is that something the average Nigerian who's at the bottom can do to ensure that corruption, like you said, grand corruption, is actually taken care of?
Okay. A few things that I just need to, very quickly. The first is it's important to clarify the analysis and the argument that one has posed here today. I think that probably because of the way you have couched the theme for this program, we keep getting back to the question of which comes first, the egg or the chicken. The fact is that we are dealing with a chicken, with an issue which is a chicken which also lays eggs. So that's the argument that I've been making here. It's a question of that it's important if we are going to be able to address this, to know, to be able to ascribe responsibility and therefore be able to know where to start addressing it from. Back to the citizens. What can the citizens do? The problem, the biggest challenge with citizens is knowing that if, for example, what is the reward for being upright? For being honest. If you are going to be punished, if society is going to punish you for being upright, then there is no incentive to be upright. Then the second thing is that as citizens, for citizens to fight corruption, they cannot do it as individuals. They need to do it. It has to be a movement. There has to be a movement of citizens against corruption, because then you can amplify your strength. That powerlessness can then become some sort of power if you become or get organized. So I can imagine if the Edo voters were, for example, organized as electorates across party levels. They are just electorates, and they are saying that in this election we want the rules to be followed, and they organize in that manner as electorates, and they do that, it would have aided the situation, but they can't do it as individuals.
All right, thank you very much, Ajayi Gaskia. He is a public affairs analyst. Thank you for coming on Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you.
All right, Rafanjani, let's get your final thoughts on this. What can we do as ordinary citizens?
Well, it is a collective action. Both the ordinary people, the ordinary citizens, the leaders, and all of us, we have to do something dramatically to change the scenario, to change the practice, because this corruption affects everybody, even the big person, the big man, the political head. When he perpetuates this, he has a relation or she has a relation. At the end of the day, they are also going to be victim of this, because it's not all of your relation, even though you stole the billions, it's not all of your relation that will live in that largesse, So there are some other people of your own relation that will continue to also suffer. So that is why it is important that collective action against corruption need to be taken, Finally, I think, like, we all said, we have to ensure that we have the right leaders, because what we have incidental leaders in many places, and that is why they do not really see anything wrong. Now, the collapse of ethics and morale in our even religious places, worship, where, religious leaders are being brought to, celebrate, criminals, and cover up, and even pray for them. And that's why God is not even answering the prayers, because this is dubious prayers, So the community leaders, the religious leaders, they all have a role to play. Yeah. The political leaders, the political parties, they must stop collecting bribe to impose candidates on people. Otherwise, the ordinary person has no option if all the two parties have peeling their candidate with corrupt person. So as ordinary voter, you are going to be faced with the no option then to vote, A or B. They're all the same.
You've made your point here that it needs collective action, be you a political leader, be you a religious leader, be you a managing director, you have to manage well, be you a messenger, you have to message well, and be you a media practitioner, you have to send the right message and ensure that we engage in developmental journalism. Well, on that note, I'd like to say special thanks to the Executive Director of CISLAC and head Transparency International in Nigeria, Awal Musa Rafanjani. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you, and good morning, Nigerians.
And on that note, we say special thanks to you too, Jay, Gaskia, and all of you. We hope you find time some other day to be part of this. And we're talking sports now. Super Eagles head coach Gennad Roy invites 24 players for World Cup qualifier against Algeria. And in tennis, Murray claims Vienna title to close in on becoming world #1. Let's join our sport.